Hello everyone, my name's Gillian Anderson and I'm the Chair for Voices for Cowper. Welcome to everyone who has joined us tonight. We had over 80 registered. We're still a little bit down on the numbers there, but I'm sure they'll enter and come during this beginning of our discussion. But I am going to pass over to Sally, if it's okay, because she was going to do our acknowledgement to country. Sally, are you still okay to do that?
Perfectly okay. Thanks, Gillian. G'day, everyone. Welcome from Gumbaynggirr country, where I'm joining you today. On behalf of the Voices for Cowper Committee, we just wanted to acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional elders, their elders past, present and emerging joining us today in the forum, and also to pay our respects to any emerging elders that are coming forward to the meeting today. We are from Voices for Cowper, which is the Gumbaynggirr, Dangari and Biripi people, but we also are fortunate to have Cathy McGowan joining us for this forum, and she joins us from a land where there's many different Indigenous tribes represented. I hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. That was lovely. So, first, can I also suggest that anybody, if you would like to introduce yourself on the chat, just put your name and where you're from. That would be also excellent.
We've got an X there.
I'm going to give you a brief outline of tonight's events. So I will give you a brief history of the Voices for Cowper and our plan for tonight. And James will then introduce Cathy McGowan, and Cathy and I'll have a chat and a conversation, and I'll ask some questions and she'll tell us a story. And we'll talk about what will an independent candidate need to do to win Cowper, and also how do you, the community, support this process? What can you do? This will be followed by a Q&A session hosted by Kim Gould. Some of you have sent in questions. If there are others you would like to ask, please put them up on the chat and we'll endeavour to ask Cathy to answer as many as time allows. Before we close, we will clarify where to from here in our search for an independent candidate for Cowper. And we plan to finish around 8 o'clock. So, Voices for Cowper's story started in June 2019 when a small committee was formed with a focus on running kitchen table conversations and listening to our communities. We all felt democracy needed to be injected from the grassroots, and their kitchen table conversations would enable communities to engage and listen to each other. COVID slowed our progress, but we kept meeting, kept planning, started running KTCs by Zoom and then face-to-face. For me, this was a highlight of our first 2 years, getting to hear, recording and documenting what our community felt about their place, how they engaged with the democratic process and what were the most important things in their world. The next highlight was after many, many hours of analysing the responses to our kitchen table questions, we produced our report. The launch of our report on the 14th of November was a huge achievement for our small committee, and we believe this publication is professional, well documented and easy to read. At that time, we asked Voices for Cowper, where to from here? The resounding response was you wanted an independent candidate to represent you in Cowper. Of major significance to the committee was that the launch also connected us with more people with energy and expertise who shared our dream and were prepared to join us. Their contribution since has been invaluable. Thank you, Jackie, Kath and Andrew. Following the launch, we emailed you, asked for donations, and within days we raised sufficient funds to undertake an advertising campaign. Our aim was to promote a process that would find an independent candidate who would represent the issues highlighted in the report and the views of the wonderful people who have supported us and become the voices of Cowper. This meeting tonight is part of that process. Tonight, we are here to inspire anyone who thinks they could be the independent person to come forward, take part in the process, and work together to find the best representation for our community to support. Finally, to all the voices, we thank you for your continued support. We applaud you, and we hope that this journey will be everything we have all dreamed about. I would now like to ask James Thompson to introduce Cathy McGowan.
Hi, thanks, Gillian. As you probably mostly know, Cathy was endorsed by Voices for Indi to contest the federal seat of Indi in northeastern Victoria in 2013. Excuse me. That made her, when she was elected, she became only the 6th person in the last 60 years to be first elected to Parliament as an independent, and also the first female independent elected in that time. Her re-election in 2016 and her successful passing of the baton to independent Helen Haines in 2019, which was an Australian parliamentary first, have together inspired a wave of community support for independence across Australia. During her time in Parliament, Cathy worked to develop policy around regional development, a National Integrity Commission, and drought policy, amongst other things. In 2019, Cathy was awarded the Accountability Roundtable Award for Political Integrity. Given we're here tonight to talk about candidates, I also wanted to highlight Cathy's career before she was in Parliament, which was also focused on regional development and women in agriculture. She began in the 80s working as an advisor to the Department of Agriculture in Victoria, and also working as a research assistant for the Liberal MP for Indi. She later managed her own consulting business for over 20 years, and way back in 2004 was awarded the Officer of the Order of Australia for her services to community through raising awareness and debate about issues affecting women in regional, rural and remote areas. She was a recipient of a Churchill Fellowship to research women in agriculture in Canada, and was a past president of Australian Women in Agriculture. Since leaving Parliament, Cathy's written a book about her experiences called Cathy Goes to Canberra. This is a must-read for any aspiring independent candidate, and just one part of her ongoing campaign to encourage others to turn up, speak and step up to leadership. Cathy's been a great inspiration and encouragement to Voices for Cowper. So it's our great pleasure to have her with us tonight to speak to us about being a candidate, a parliamentarian, and to answer our questions. Thanks very much, Cathy.
Hello, everybody. And James, thank you for that lovely introduction. Gillian, it's lovely to see you here and everybody else.
Yes.
Before, I've got a couple of things I want to say in the beginning, but I also just want to claim a love of your electorate. James, in your introduction, you talked about my consultancy business. So for a number of years, I worked with women in dairy, and I was a regular visitor to Cowper, particularly when the dairy industry was being deregulated and we were working out, well, what was the future of the industry? So I know your electorate really well, though I haven't been there lately, but love it. And I love the people as well, and particularly the farmers and the farming women and their families that I met. So if there are any women online tonight from those Women in Dairy Days and the New South Wales Women in Dairy conferences that we had at Port Macquarie and whatever, just to say hello. And also, I suppose, with that little bit of introduction, I did want to offer you my commitment to walk this journey with you. I want to say what you are doing is really worthwhile. It's really important work. It's possible. And from my perspective and looking at the numbers, there's no reason at all why an independent, a community independent with the backing of this group couldn't win Cowper. So I want to just put that out there and to give you my my pledge, I suppose, but to walk with the successful candidate, but also with the team of people they will gather around them, and anything that I have learned through the process that can be useful to give you the cutting edge so that you can actually win this seat and get your independent into Parliament. I'll be there for you. So with those words, I'll pass it over to you, Gillian, and you can start the interrogation.
Cathy, to hear you say those words is just, I can't tell you the sort of strength that it gives us, because we have admired you for a long time. And as an ex-dairy farmer, way back in another life, and the Bellingen Valley where I am, very much a dairying, has got so much history about dairying. But yes, there's some very beautiful people. We have a beautiful, beautiful electorate, and it's great that you have that knowledge of it. Cathy, I'm going to start with that, really, the nuts and bolts question is, what do we have to do for an independent candidate? What do they need to do to win Cowper?
So I'm going to start with the numbers, because that's really, you've got to get enough votes. You've got to get 50.1% of the two candidate preferred vote. And so I've obviously, gone on to the Australian Electoral Commission website and had a look at the last election. And so here's what you need to do to win. Here's what somebody needs to do. And I'll talk about that somebody in a minute. But what needs to happen is you need to bring the incumbent's vote. He won by 47% of the first preference vote. You've got to bring him down. You've got to take about 7,000 votes from him and bring him down to about 40% of the first preference vote. And then you've got to convince all the people who voted for Rob Oakeshott at the last election, and that's about 24% of the vote. You've got to convince them to still vote for your candidate. And then you've got to get another, I think, 6,000 first preference votes. Now, they should be from disaffected Liberals, because the incumbent is a National Party person, and there's bound to be a large number of disaffected Liberals in your electorate who would vote one for your independent candidate and put the incumbent as number two, the National Party as number two. So you've got to convince not everybody, but about 7,000 of those who voted for the incumbent to change their vote. You've got to convince all the Rob Oakeshott people to hold true. And if you do that, you'll get your independent vote up to about 30%. And another couple of thousand votes would be really useful. So if you can get some Labor and Green people to swing, that'd be great. So that's the base number. And then you've got to convince everybody else's preferences to flow to you. So anybody who doesn't vote for the incumbent, they've got to give you their number two vote. And that way you can garner it together. Now, that's totally possible. When I say it like that, bring the incumbent's vote down by 6,000 shouldn't be hard. You should be able to convince 6,000 Liberals to say, nah, we're going to do a protest vote on climate, on community, on a whole lot of things. You should be able to get a few Greens and Labor people to say, yep, we really think this is a go. We're going to give our first preference to our independent person. You should be able to do that. And I think you definitely should be able to hold Rob's vote. So I think it's totally possible. So that's the pragmatics of it. And then I'm very happy to talk about characteristics of the candidate and community work, which we could do. We could also talk about, Gillian.
Yes, that sounds like an excellent idea, and I think that gives a very clear picture. And as you say, it's very possible. One of the difficulties always in our electorate is having two major centres and getting the coverage there, but it's about that team. And maybe, is that the next thing, Cathy, that you'd like to talk about? Or let's think about the candidate, the type of candidate that you see as that would work well in this position.
So one of the things I love about Cowper is it's so like Indi, except where you've got a National Party candidate, we had a Liberal candidate. We had small centres like Wodonga, Wangaratta, small centres, and then valleys everywhere. So we had to really work our community. So it's a very similar topography. What the characteristics I think that make for a successful community independent is they've got to have courage. This is not a job for the wimp. So if you think it's going to be too hard, don't go there. But I know there are enough people around who've got courage. You know, we breed them in the regions. So you've got to have courage and you've got to have self-belief. Because as an independent, you're not going in to be a backbencher and be told what to do. You're going to be brave and courageous to represent your community. So that's really important. You've got to love people. This is not a job for somebody who wants to stay home all the time and not go out. Because one of the things I read about in the Kitchen Table Conversations report is people really want their Member of Parliament to turn up, you know, to come to events, is to get to know you and be the sort of person who says, yeah, I can see you've got an issue with your roads. I'll write to local government for you. Or I see you've got an issue with New South Wales state government. Yeah, I'll get on board and I'll help you do that. And of course, they'll help with the federal issues as well. But they've got to be the sort of person who really cares about people and helping people in their lives. They've got to be able to make decisions. Now, this is a really important characteristic because once you're in Parliament, no one's telling you what to do. So you need to be able to refer back to your community. But sometimes when you're voting between two really bad options. And you go, oh my God, you know, I don't like either of these, but I've got to vote. Well, you don't have to vote. You could always abstain, but you don't want to do that. You want to vote. So you've got to be really good at what I call decision-making and setting up a decision-making framework. Now, if you haven't done that before in your life, it's pretty hard to start now. But luckily, most of us and people on board tonight will have been parents. They know about decision-making, that many of them would have run their own business. They know about customer service and putting boundaries around decisions and doing that sort of work. Another characteristic that's really important is being able to organise your team. Now, Voices for Cowper have done a fantastic job in putting a team together, and there's 300 plus people in the database, but your candidate is running the election themselves. It won't be run by Voices for Cowper. So this person will be a team player and a team leader, and they really do need to be able to bring out the best in their teams. They want everybody, as James just said, to be able to step up, speak up, and take on leadership roles. Because while the candidate will be the public face, you actually need a very strong leadership team to get elected. It's not a one-person job. You've got to have a really strong team. And the final characteristic I'd be saying is you've got to be able to get things done. It's because when you get to Parliament, if you're not part of the parties control how things are done. This is a really good opportunity for you to be able to network, to build coalitions, to work across the aisle, to work with peak bodies, to bring people together to get things done. And that was one of the things I most love about being a Member of Parliament is I'd always been able to get things done. I'm a networker, I bring people together. And I found that those skills were just so useful in Parliament. And I wasn't scared of saying, you know, if we did this, this and this, and we could do this and this could happen, we'll get it sorted. And I'm just going to finish with this example. One of the things, we had a huge problem in Northeast Victoria with our train line. It was owned by the Commonwealth, but it was run by the states, and it was deteriorating really badly. And then just last week, after 10 basic years of trying really hard, we got new trains on a new train line. And it was a result of our community and me as community leader, bringing local government, state government, federal government, the trains people, everybody together and working as a collective because we could find what we had in common. So I'm going to summarise courage and self-belief. Loving people is really good, able to make a decision, organise a team and get things done. They're really good characteristics to have.
Yes, that sounds wonderful. That networking and collaborating is such an important one, isn't it, Cathy, where you can get people, and that's what we do around the kitchen table, don't we? You know, ask the common questions and everybody's in agreement. So I think that's a great skill that's obviously served you very well. So then we talk about the team. You know, what sort of team, what sort of people do you look for? What are the key people within that team?
So I don't know if I've sent you, Gillian, but my sister Ruth has written a book called A Handbook for Getting Elected. Have you guys got a copy?
No, I don't think we'll
okay,
look that one
so
up.
After tonight, I'll put 3 copies in the mail for you because
thank you.
Ruth was part of my election team, and we really wanted a handbook. So after the 2016 election, she wrote the handbook. So it's getting elected for independence. That's what it's about. And she talks about all the job descriptions, talks about the roles you need, and she's got job descriptions for people there. So I'm not going to go into that too much detail, because it's like any team. You've got to have admin people, you've got to have comms people, you've got to have your numbers people, you've got to have your legal backup. That's all obvious. But to win is a different thing. So how do you actually win a seat in a community electorate like ours? And the thing that worked for me was having people on my team who actually understood community networking and could say, okay, for example, there's races in Mansfield on Saturday. Helen Haynes, you need to get to the races. I'll go with you, and I'll make sure that all my friends are going to be there at the races with you. And you can watch the races for sure, but that's not why you're going. You are going to go and meet every single person at the races on Saturday. So you need people on your team who can help you link in, and if you link into and set up community events that enable your candidate to get known, because the candidate's not going to win by themselves. They're going to win because you, the people of Cowper, say that person is good and I'm backing them. And it's that word of mouth, but it's also what we call third-party endorsement. It'll be that third-party endorsement that will get you that 6,000 or 7,000 Liberal votes. You'll be able to convince people that, okay, put the National Party incumbent second, but give your first vote for this person because I know them and I know they're good. So it's that sort of how do you get the third-party endorsement happening? And only country people know how to do that. City people don't know it. Advertising agencies don't know it. But in my community, I was able to find those people, and they were retired neighbourhood house coordinators. They were secretaries of race clubs. They were people who'd been chair of the school fundraising committee or the hospital board. So I found those community people incredibly helpful. Now, most of them didn't want to go on another committee. I had a centralised committee that had about 20 people on it. And then we had these community hubs. So in each of the major population centres, we actually hired shop fronts by 2019, but we had community hubs, and we had these really good community workers in these hubs, and they'd be on usually in a very big on a shop front and on a busy street, big banners, big signs out the side, and they'd be staffed by really good community people. So people would come in off the street, people would be able to ask questions, people would be able to pick up call flutes. So it was those community hubs that actually got me elected, because they were able to really get me deep penetration into the community. And one of the things that I held and know to be true, people don't vote for you just because they've heard your name. They need 3 knocks. They need to have heard your name, they need to have seen you on TV or in the newspaper, and then they need somebody else saying, yep, I know they're good. So you actually have to work out how to get three knocks happening, and you need it in your rural communities. And I'm going to finish off with this, because basically I thought if the most extreme parts of my community, of the electorate, know about me, then the mainstream big towns will know about me. So I put a lot of work into making sure that I turned up at the extremes of the electorate, because I knew that the word of mouth would flow back to the main centres.
That's such an interesting point, Cathy. And because we do have these smaller areas where, a lot of times the people aren't going, but the concept, I think, of getting the people who are in those communities and doing your networking, because they know when the local community stalls are on, markets are on, all the places that you need to be. So I think that's some really interesting things to think about there. Tell me, Cathy, I think one thing that we talk about quite a lot, and we did find it difficult in kitchen table conversations, was engage with the younger generation. Would you like to talk about that a little?
I would, because it is so important. it is so important. So, but it's a challenge. It's not done easily. So what I did was I started out with my immediate family and my main supporters' family. Now, that I did that because I just thought, well, at least they're keen to get me elected. And so there was about 12 or 13 people in that small young people's group. And they wanted me to be elected more than I wanted to be elected, because they really cared about climate change. They really cared about integrity. And also they wanted things in the regions to be better. They didn't want to spend their whole lives in the city. They wanted to come back home and be able to grow businesses and do things here. So with working with young people, start with your children and your nieces and nephews and their friends, and ask them, what would it take to get a change in our representative? Because there is no way known those young people who care about climate change want more of the National Party, but they need help in getting organised. And it will be the children of you leaders here tonight who actually know how to reach the other young people. So I'm just going to tell you, so my organising group of young people was never really big, but it was really clever. And all those young people knew how social media worked. So they just set up themselves, and then they just, with sort of permission to start with, but after a while I knew giving them permission was useless because they wanted it more than I did. They weren't going to stuff it up. So they then had their own little teams, and their own little teams in the different communities did things. Now, they made a really, this is dated now, but I'm just going to tell you the story because you've got to liberate the creativity of the young people. So that they made a little thing that was called CATS, C-A-T-S, Cats for Cathy. And it was just these silly play on words about Cathy, and if you don't elect Cathy, it's going to be catastrophic, and pictures of cats, stupid stuff. But I can remember during the first campaign going into Wodonga supermarket, and a young teenager came up, and I went and introduced myself. Oh no, I know all about you. I'm voting for you. I've seen Cats for Cathy. I went, great. That's all he needed to know. He didn't need to know anything else about politics. He was going to give me his first vote.
Yeah.
And so having small groups of young people in your main population centres and getting them organised to use their own networks and to market your candidate, because they're the mother, they're the aunt. I was the aunt, and they were very keen to get me elected.
Oh.
But I also made a commitment to them that if I did get elected, I would continue to represent them in Parliament. And I did. I actually made that. So I had three main groups of people that I was committed to represent: the Aboriginal community, the young people in particular, and there's another group, but I'll leave that aside for a sec. And so when I was a member of Parliament, I kept on working with these young people. And I'm just going to finish, by the time I finished in 2019, we would run, across the electorate, we would run a survey on the budget. And I had something like 300 young people turn up to my budget breakfasts. Like, I paid for the breakfast and organised transport, but these young people turned up across the electorate to give me their feedback on the federal budget. And it started with a small group, but because I was so committed to it, and I knew that if we could get the young people hooked into politics, then they would help be the change that we want to see.
Yeah.
Because
Cathy, you mentioned there the First Nations people, and we have quite a lot of First Nations people across our electorate, and worked hard to involve them with our kitchen table, which we did to a certain extent. Was there anything specifically that you found was helped you in that area?
With the work with the First Nations people, they did not trust me at all, and it with very good reason. Very good reason. So I wouldn't say there's no one thing that worked, but my public commitment to be their representative and to consult with them on issues that were important to them, which I've kept up, and I'm still committed to improving the representation. I just had to demonstrate that I was true to my word.
Yeah.
Because there is such a history of members of Parliament saying one thing and doing another. So no, there's no easy answer to that.
No, and we've got people on committee who've got really good connections in that area, and we'll certainly be working to enhance that. Cathy, I think what a lot of people are going to be feeling, that everything that you're saying has got this overlay for this election of COVID, and how do we manage that? Because that contact, that face-to-face, that getting to see someone is going to be so much harder. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I don't think it has to be. I don't know about you, but I live on a farm, and if we've always used the phone. If we can use the phone, if we can use radio, we've always done that. Like it's very, you might have a committee meeting once a month, but you do all the work by phone or emails. Like we're experts at it. So I don't think COVID has to be, in the cities definitely, but for us in the country, we've got to get on the phone, we've got to get on our emails, and we've got to use our networks. So I'll talk about some of that. So there's a thing called mapping your networks. So we set up one of these community hubs in Wangaratta, and very early in the piece, I got the key networkers in that community. We got out all our butcher's paper. Now you could do this by Zoom. We actually did it in real time, got all the butcher's paper out and said, okay, what are the networks in this town? Who knows who, and who's going to go and do the work? And so it was just like a fundraising activity. So that's what we did. So people went away with a list of people they've got to go and talk to and their ask. And the ask changed early in the campaign. It was just, as we got closer to the campaign, we had different asks, but we had databases, and we had the big database, and then we had the subsections of it. So all the people in Wodonga, and then people actually got their phones with their list of names on their phone. So if we were having, for example, one of the young people decided that we weren't doing enough work in this particular town. So the young people organised a flash mob in Rutherglen. And the flash mob was that they got 6 or 8 of people from Rutherglen, again, family and friends. They sent the word out by their phones. We're all going to meet at the florist in Rutherglen at 1 o'clock on Thursday.
In orange shirts.
Yeah, in their own shirts. But that wasn't, the flash mob was, the task was to buy up the shop of flowers, because that flower, the florist had been talking about how hard business was. So between them, they got their money, maybe $60 or $70, maybe $100, went in there, bought every single flower in that shop, then went up the main street and took all the flowers to the senior citizens' home.
Yeah,
so they organised all of that. I wasn't even there. And they did it as a flash mob, used their phones. But of course, they told the media they were doing it. So the TV was there, the newspapers was there. I wasn't there at all. But it just, that's sort of, so you can do that. I think, I'm just using that as an example, but we've got the tools in the country to work via distance, and COVID is going to actually play into our hands because we can phone up, we can email. And I know in our campaign here, we're going to be doing a thing called, it's called phone banking. Banking is the wrong word. I think we need a much better expression for it. But what we're going to do is have nights where we either come together, 3 or 4 of us, but that might be difficult. But at one time, at a set time, we're all going to get on the phone and ring up people that we know in our community. So it'll be 2 hours, 2 nights a week where we phone people, and we've got a script, and there's a bit of a survey. So, and it's going to be organised. So we'll ring them up and say, hi, it's Cathy here. I'm supporting Helen Haynes. I've got a few quick questions for you. Can you tell me, do you know Helen? Would you like to know more about her? So we've got a little survey that we run them through. Takes 8 minutes. And if we've got enough people doing it, we can get, again, deep penetration into the community. But even more importantly, what we do is we get the data back to Helen Haynes's campaign, saying that we've spoken to 15 people in Yakandanda, and of those 15 people, 5 definites for Helen, 3 question marks, and people want to see her. And out of all that, we've got 2 people who are going to volunteer, and we've got 8 more people on the database. And then we'd feed that back into Helen's central campaign, and then she could start collecting a map of what the feeling was across the electorate, where she was popular, where she wasn't popular, and where she needed to do more work.
And I think that's a lovely example, Cathy. And I think really lovely to hear you talk about how COVID can actually be a positive in rural electorates, because we're a little bit more spread out. And as you say, we know how to communicate. And of course, we all know how to use Zoom now and sort of feel like we actually know the person. And I think, you know, we're not as separated and we've got technology, which is great. I'm going to keep a little eye on the time because we're going to go into questions. There was just another one that I wanted to touch on. Sometimes we've heard that maybe somebody else would stand as an independent. Can you just talk about the disadvantage or advantage of one or two independents standing?
So when I first got elected in 2012, there were 5 main candidates: Liberal, Green, Labor, me, and another independent, strong independent. And then, but there were 12 altogether of the micro parties. But I was the only one who had I was the only independent with the community backing. So from the very beginning, I was like you guys, you've got 300 people be acting, but I mean, behind you. So straight away, you're in the forefront. So it's a little bit like a horse race. Like if I could give the analogy of a Melbourne Cup. So you had 12 people lined up at the barriers go up and everybody races out. Now, if you're a community independent candidate with the backing of your community, straight away you're on the inside track and you're a furlong ahead of everybody else. Now, other independents will run for sure, but they're not going to be community independents. They're not going to have done the kitchen table conversations. They'll be very good people, and they'll be, I mean, as long as it's not Rob Oakeshott. It would be tough to run against Rob, I'd say, if you had 2 candidates of that caliber. But I don't think it will happen because you've got a good process. So yeah, so there will be other independents running. Now, the trick is to make sure you stay on the inside track with your announcement and with your organisational skills. So you become the community independent for Cowper. No one else is going to be that. Other people say, oh, well, I'm an independent or I'm a whatever, which they might be, but they're not going to be the community independent with the backing of the kitchen table conversations and the resources. So that's part of your marketing. But also once you get ahead and you're known because you've got the better strategy, and other independents will run. Now, I have to say that there's 2 electorates where it hasn't worked out like that. The non-community independent,
trying to build your sales.
The non-community backed independent raced ahead, and she got out of the barracks first, and the community independent was about 2 weeks later, and that other person had grabbed a whole lot of the limelight and the space. Now, when that happens, it's really, really difficult, as in a horse race, I mean, you can, absolutely you can, but it's just difficult. So I think what you're trying to do now is to make sure that you select one community independent and that you have an agreement with the other people that they will work to get one elected, because you don't want to divide your vote. You actually want to have one horse win this, and you can do it with one horse. It's really, really difficult if you split the preferences at the end and you lose out. And it's happened lots of times where you've got 2 good independents running, the preferences go every which way, and the incumbent wins. I'll talk separately about preferences. I won't do that now, but that's another whole conversation, but it's a really important one to have.
Muted myself and I'm chatting away here to myself. Cathy, I think you and I have had a lovely conversation and I hope everyone's really enjoyed it. We've gone a little bit over time, but I don't think people will mind. But what we're going to do now is people have put in questions prior to today, and Kim Gould is going to manage that Q&A. So I'm going to hand over to Kimmy, and she's going to ask those questions that our people have put in. Thanks, Kim.
Hi, Cathy.
Hello.
Lovely to meet you, and thank you for being here. And I just wanted to mention that obviously the numbers of people that are here are really indicative of how much we value your experience and what you've got to share with us tonight, and it's already been amazing. So thank you for that. I've got 4 or 5 questions. We've got about 20 minutes, just so you know the kind of time frame. We didn't have time to put all the questions to you, obviously, that we received from people, but we've done our best to condense them so that hopefully we're covering all of the kind of, threads, I suppose, that we saw in the questions that people sent us. And particularly we asked people to ask questions about 2 things mainly: what to expect if you run as an independent, and how can the community best support the endorsed candidate, which are, 2 things we've been talking about so far. So let's just launch ourselves into question 1. What steps did you take to finance your campaign, and what impact did the funds raised have on the eventual outcome?
Good question. So I put a lot of money, not a lot of money. I put $5,000 up front, and I went and bought myself clothes and made sure that I had enough money for petrol. And someone lent me a van that we then got covered, and someone else donated and covered the costs of the travel. So clothes and travel were initial really expense that I sort of basically covered. And initially, we started out by trying to get big donors to give us money, and it didn't work. So what we did was we asked our supporters to all put in $50. And the initial 20 on my team put in $50, so we had that money, and then we were off and running. We did 3 budgets. We did a budget for $50,000, $100,000 and $150,000, because we were pretty confident that we could raise $50,000. And we did. And then that $50,000 covered insurance, hire of these hubs, community hubs, electricity, all those sort of things, and basic advertising. But we got our 50,000 pretty quickly, and then we moved on to the 100,000 budget. And in the end, in that first election, I think I had the $150,000 came in, and that extra money was used to buy advertising. So that's it. So basically, there were 2 tricks to raising money. You've got to ask people for money, and people gave it. They wanted this change and they understood it. But when I explained what I wanted money for, it made it easier. So if you give us $2,000, we can run X advertisements on the local radio station for 3 weeks. So people were really happy when we itemised how the money would be used. If you give us X number of dollars, like $1,000, we can print X number of T-shirts. And, businesses gave me thousands of dollars to print the T-shirts. So that worked. The other thing that I did, talking about raising money, I want to just talk about this one because it really worked for me in the rural areas, because I've talked about the disaffected Liberals that you need to win. I needed to get the vote of the disaffected National Party because we had a Liberal candidate. So what I asked my women in agriculture friends to do, could they organise open farm days, open garden days? And they did. So we'd get a popular farmer, and she'd open her garden for the day, for the afternoon. And she'd invite her friends. So we get 20 or 30 people would come. They'd pay $20 to come to look at the garden. And then other people would put up, a market table, fruit and veg and jams and potted plants. So that'd sell. And then we'd always have a raffle. So there'd be local artists who'd do paintings, or we'd have raffles of selling of service, whatever it is. So 30 people at a farmer's farm would raise me sometimes $3,000 or $4,000. And not only did it raise the money, because people came they wanted to spend money because they knew it was a fundraiser, but not only did it get me the money, it got these people in the electorate where I needed it to know me and build the word of mouth that I was talking about. So fundraising, getting your Liberal Party, I don't mean Liberal Party, I mean friends who would traditionally vote Liberal, business people who have got really good networks to organise a fundraiser for you, I know COVID's difficult, but I'm just saying an evening outside in someone's garden and people know it's a fundraiser, and you do that, you do the market, you do an entry fee, you have a raffle. It was just a no-brainer. And I just got such good response. And plus I loved it. So, so being creative about local money made a huge difference. And a few big donors, maybe I got a couple of people gave me $1,000. Someone gave me $2,000, like one person, but everybody else, it was $50 to $100 to $200. But you've got to have a really good admin person, data entry person, because you've got to account for all that money. So, but that's the AEC have a really good web page and a handbook about how you do all that.
Yeah.
So local money got me local ownership. And it was really important because I'm just going to finish off on this. In other elections, outside people wanted to give me money. I said, no, I don't want it. You know, someone offered me $40,000. So I don't want it. I don't need it. Don't want it. And I'm not going to, I don't want to owe you money. Whereas local people putting money in means I've got a direct relationship with my community. And that's how I wanted it to be.
You know, we found here that we asked for donations for advertising, and within 2 weeks we had the money that we asked for. And as you say, it was just lots of small donations for people who really cared, and it came really quickly. And I'm really curious about this. If you had got big donors straight up, that might have been very different for you in terms of what your campaign turned out to be.
No, because we had a fundraising policy. So we were never going to accept large scale money.
Yeah.
And our preference was always for local money. So you need a fundraising policy that's based on your values. And it's, you've got to stay true to, clearly, it wasn't hard to stay true to, but we developed that fundraising policy and we made it publicly available to people. We put on my webpage, here's what the rules are. Yeah. But we also accepted money from outside the electorate via our webpage, but only those people who wanted to do online transfer. So maybe we did get maybe $5,000 or $6,000 from what I called the expats, people who'd grown up in the area, gone to Melbourne and Sydney. They couldn't campaign, so they were encouraged to send us money, and they did, which was great.
Yeah, love it. And I love the synergy between the local involvement and the fundraising that you talked about with the open. That's just great. Okay, next question. How did you personally cope with the negative campaigning from major parties during your first election?
So it's a really good question again. So we knew it was going to happen. We knew we were going to get into trouble. We were really, really naughty kids, and we know about country and how it works. So from the very beginning, we said, we are not going to go there. They can say anything they want to about us. And it happens in the country all the time. People gossip about you, you know about it, but you've got a choice. Will you engage with it or will you ignore it? So we basically ignored it. No problem. Yeah. I mean, really, truly, once my team had decided that our mantra was going to be, we are going to be our best selves. We are not going to engage in it. And people can say anything they like about us. And very quickly, my opposition, the incumbent, realised it didn't work because people, it just landed, she'd say something nasty. It's a bit like when you have a fight with your husband and they don't answer back. They just say, oh, I love you, darling, have some flowers. Like, you can't have an argument if the other person doesn't argue with you. And once we realised that, it became what we call our competitive advantage. The fact that we were fundamentally good community people, we wanted something much better for our community, and we weren't going to engage in nasty politics, and we didn't. Or occasionally we did, and someone would come up and say, oh, Cathy, I wasn't my best self. I wasn't, but I'm going to be next time. Well, that's okay. So we really tried hard to get all our volunteers just not to engage in negative politics. Yeah. Now, it absolutely happened, and I tell stories in my books about how much trouble we got into, but the fact of the matter, the community really responded to the fact that every time, we just kept ourselves nice. If you haven't got anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And the other thing that I did, which we did that really worked, Kim, was we said to everybody, we're giving you a better choice. Look, there's nothing wrong with the current, well, we basically said, you can vote for the current person. There's nothing wrong about that. If you're a rusted on Liberal or Labor, you vote that way. We just think we're a much better choice, and we'd like you to vote for us because we're going to be better. Yeah. And people loved it, that we didn't sling off. We didn't say what was bad about the others. We said, look, they're good people. They're trying their best. We're just better. Look what we've done. Look at my community. Look
how refreshing to have that when people are so used now to dirty politics, to have that as an option as well.
And when I got to Canberra, it worked for me so well because I never did play in that negative space. Yeah. And so consequently, my ability to work across Parliament was really huge because people could see I was a woman of integrity and I didn't sling off and I didn't play politics.
Yeah, and I noticed what you were talking about before with the qualities of an independent. And one of the things that came through really clearly for me listening to that was you saying basically that you were very solution oriented, that your whole purpose was to see what the problems in your community were and find solutions. Yeah. And so there's no time in that to play politics.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Next question.
It all makes such sense when you talk about it, and in the country particularly, because that's how we do things.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you say, in the country, everyone talks to everyone else. So, you know, the cleaner you keep it, the better too. Okay. Question 3. As an independent MP, how many hours per week did you average? Did this wax and wane? And from your personal experience or from colleagues, how much impact did the role have on your family?
Yeah, good questions. Look, it's all up to you how much you work. No one's telling you. You make your own job. Now, I worked really hard because I wanted to win. Yeah. I did. And and I was really pleased when I finished being a member of parliament. 6 years was enough. I wanted to get my life back. I wanted to catch up on my sleep. So I worked incredibly hard. And I chose to do it. And it's just like when you're running your own business, you really want to be the business to work, you work really hard. So it's a big job. But the job is diverse. There were 3 types of work. There was going to parliament, there was getting out and about in the community, and then there was constituent work. So going to parliament is only a third of the job. It was only 20 weeks of the year. So I'd drive up on Sunday, work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, leave parliament Thursday night, be back home Thursday night, and be around my farm Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And parliament, as I said, only sits 20 weeks of the year and 2-week blocks, and then you get 3 weeks off. So it was like I had a job working from home. I still lived at home, got all my farm organised, you know, that was no big deal. I'm also not married, so that's helpful. But my partner, David, he's got his own farm somewhere else, and he could work out what he wanted to do. He didn't come to some things, he didn't come to other stuff. You know, he basically managed his own life. No one was telling him what to do. So you can do that. Going to Canberra is not a huge, I mean, when you're there, you work, but it's only 20 weeks of the year. The next part of the job is constituent work. So that's people coming to your office, or when I took my caravan out saying, I've got a problem, can you help me? And when I finished in 2019, I had 15,000 open files in my office for constituent work. But the wonderful thing is that I had 12 staff. And you get more staff as an independent than if you're a member of a party. And I know Helen Haynes now got 32, out of 100,000 people, she's got 32,000 open cases. Wow. And she's got 12 or 13 staff, and they work full time on doing all that work. So you oversight it, but I didn't do a lot of that. My job was to get out and about, and I would go to the opening of an envelope. I really would. I loved it. So I had my caravan that was branded Cathy McGowan, and I'd drive all over the electorate, and people go, but I saw you in Corryong yesterday and now you're in Mansfield today. And I go, yep, that's me. So the word of mouth, and I'd turn up, and I just loved that part of the job because it got me out and about. So the job is as big as or as small as you want to make it, but it's also how much do you want to win the next election? And most of us do. So we put the hours in. But no, you've got a team. It's not always your own job. And I'd been a small business owner, and I knew that the job was infinite. So I was able to put really clear boundaries around my work-life balance and my farm and my family. But I was old and ugly enough to do that, and I'd learned how to do it. Yeah. So it's really useful if you've run your own business and you know that you can't do everything, and you've got to be able to delegate.
Yeah, and coming back to that framework for decision-making that you mentioned earlier, which is so important. When you talk about having, you know, that it's infinite, and to be able to have some kind of framework to manage it.
And we did strategic planning in the offices, worked out what our priorities were. Yeah. We had a big matrix of where all the communities were that I had to go to. So we were incredibly structured and organised to make sure that we had the impact that we wanted.
Yeah, yeah. Next question, how do you engage Conservative voters?
So I offered a better choice, and I was really sure that I was a better choice than what we had, not only from the incumbent, but from the government and what they were doing. And I knew I was a better choice because we'd done the kitchen table conversations and I'd spoken to people. So I had 5 or 6 things that I knew I could do better. I knew I could turn up. I said, I'll turn up. I knew I could represent the young people. I said, I'll represent the young people. I knew about regional Australia, and I said, I'm actually going to work for better policy for regional Australia, better internet, better mobile phone coverage, better transport, because the incumbent hadn't done any of that. I said, I can't promise I'm going to do it, but I'm promising I'm going to work on it. And so because we'd done the kitchen table conversations, I knew what people wanted. So I said, and look at me, you know, I'm enthusiastic. I've got all this community behind me. We can do it better. And people go, oh, maybe. So the answer to your question is how I engage with Conservative people. I mostly didn't, because I respected that in the end, probably 32,000 people in my electorate would vote for the Liberal National Party. And they did. I just needed, in fact, 42,000 voted for them. Yeah. I just needed to make sure that I got 32,000 and all the preferences, which means I could win. Yeah. Which is why I bothered to do those numbers at the beginning. So the thing is, I basically, and I'm happy to do an online workshop for you and have a more detailed discussion about this. We call it Courageous Conversations. But if someone was Conservative, rusted on, didn't want to talk, Labor, Liberal, Green, I'd acknowledge and say, thanks, that's fine. I didn't even try and argue with them. But what I'd try and find is the ones in the middle who are interested in something better for their kids, something better for their community, and would talk to them about, and my volunteers and my supporters, about how I would be a better choice. So I'm really happy to run some online workshops for you about those courageous conversations. But I tell you what, it was a no-brainer. People could see that what we currently had was no good. Your people see that. They'll want to do a protest vote. And I say, I'm your protest vote, and I'm going to be a better member of Parliament.
Yep. Great. And that would be amazing to have that, going and, like you say, being at that cutting edge and looking at the numbers and being really pragmatic about what you actually have to do to get across the line. It's really valuable. How did you create and manage your campaign team? You've given us a book recommendation for that. Is there anything else you'd like to share about that?
Yeah. Look, it's all about strategy. It's got nothing to do about how you feel. Yeah. I can't say enough is that's why running your own business is a really useful way of doing this, because you've got to provide customer service. You're the product. You've got to have a strategy about how you're going to do things. And it's got to be based on data. It can't be just how you feel. So where are you going to win those 6,000 Liberal votes? You need a strategy for that. And you need your team to agree to the strategy. So you don't put all your energy where you're not going to get the votes. Yeah. And you've got to actually be strategic about it. But you guys have got it. You know, you've got your marketing, you've got your expertise. But on my team, what I was able to do was see where I had some strategic gaps and go and ask some of the people I knew. Like, I needed a banker. I really needed a really clever finance person, and I needed a really good bookkeeper, a data entry person. So I got friends of mine and said, look, would you come and do this for me on the team? I needed really good management of the campaign. I needed so I had 2 or 3 people, one who'd look after me, make sure I got where I had to go, like a diary manager person. Yeah. Someone else looked after the volunteers. So we actually had strategies, and then we would meet every week. The 20 of us would get together, talk about, everyone had portfolios and keeping, and then when we had urgent things happen, everything goes wrong always. We'd have instantaneous ways we could have a telephone conference and sort stuff out. So we were really strategic. We had really good rules. We had good policy, and we made sure that we understood we were going to have conflict. So let's sort the conflict out before it happens. And what are the rules about how do you manage disagreements? So we did a lot of work on that. And we did have conflicts, of course, but we were able to manage them in-house. But I'm just going to tell you one story. I made so many mistakes. So the very first mistake, and I'll probably finish on this one, was very early in the piece. We launched a campaign and I was going to be the candidate, and the local big newspaper said, Cathy, what are your major policies? And I said very proudly, oh, I don't have any policies. I'm going to talk to the community. So headline right across, McGowan has no policies. And it was like I didn't have my words right, because I was going to represent the community. So straight away after that, I went and got really serious media training, and I never, ever made that mistake before. And I had a little group of people who were my sounding board to help me get my words right, because you need to be succinct and clear. You can't tell a story. And it's a thing called you have a sound bite. You know, you've got 30 seconds on the radio. So I'd have to write it down, then ring up. What do you think? Have I got it right? So I really needed a good little team around me on my communication as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know we've been doing a lot of this in the Voices for Cowper group as we've sort of developed our portfolios, but also that messaging and how important that is. We've been playing around with a lot of the things that you said. Okay, I think that's probably it for the questions. Thank you very much. Prospective candidates, just to let you know, you're welcome to stay and have a chat with Cathy after we're finished here. But I'm going to throw back now to Gillian. Thank you again, Cathy. That was great.
Thank you, Kim. Oh, Cathy, we love listening to you, and it's just beautiful to see your enthusiasm still so evident. I think one of the things that we have had a lot of questions coming through, and we're probably running out of time. We could have had you for 2 hours, I think, but I do know that a lot of people are asking what sort of time frame, because I know we feel we're a little bit late, and what time frame did you have, and do you think that we have to manage that?
Yeah, you've got you need a time budget. So basically what happens with the major parties, they have a date, they call it N or E. E is election day. And then they have a 30-day program, what they're going to do 30 days before that, and a 90-day project. Now, as soon as you've got your candidate, they need to get their 30-day once, because the election, you don't know when it is, but you can actually plan what you're going to do. So you need to get to all the major centres, you need to get all this sort of stuff done. So the first job is to get your timeline and your time frame organised with the amount of time you've got done. And it doesn't matter how much time you've got, you've never got enough time. But to be really disciplined in your strategy and make sure your candidate does the work that only they can do, and that your team do the work that they can do. Because you don't want your candidate doing work when they need to be out and about. You don't want to be them stuck up, putting stuff in envelopes, for example. And you want your hubs off and running really quickly so that those hubs can actually start the word of mouth stuff. So you need someone who's got really good time organisational skills. Like in any business, get your Gantt chart organised. How are we going to do this? How are we going to get those? How are we going to get Rob's votes? How are we going to bring those Liberal Party on board? How are we going to get the young people going? And then just liberate people to actually do their own jobs and get them out. And I think, you'll have, maybe you'll have, who knows how long you have, but you'll have enough time because you've done 2 years of huge organising. You've got a database of 300 plus people. You know what the issues are. You know your communities. You can pull this off in no time, I'm sure.
Yes, and I think hopefully that's what the Voices for Cowper, although we're not running a campaign, we've done a lot of groundwork, and hopefully our successful candidate will be able to use that and the knowledge that we have been able to gain. Now, we did want to sort of say to any of the candidates, prospective candidates, if they wanted to ask Cathy something, or Cathy would stay behind later and have a chat. But is there any maybe Kath Cosgrave, I know she's been keeping track of some questions there too. Kath, is there any that have really come through that you'd like to ask Cathy? I'll see if I can get where Kath Cosgrave is. There she is.
Hi, Gillian. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. There was just one more. You and Kim have very aptly covered them all. There was something about the impact of smaller donations versus larger corporation donations by Michael Sullings.
Look, you guys need, the candidate needs a policy, who they'll take money from. And I was talking to some people in Groom, in Toowoomba about this, because the AEC rules, the AEC rules, Australian Electoral Commission rules for money are Australia-wide, but each state have different rules. Now, New South Wales have different donations to Victoria for a state election. So I would be encouraging you to go online and look at the New South Wales Electoral Commission funding rules, who can take money and how you disclose it, and just see if that'll work for you.
Yeah, thank you, Cathy. That's good advice.
Okay.
Anything
And just
else?
one more. Cathy, are you happy to share the INDI fundraising policy strategy?
No, I think not, because it's all out of date now, and I'm not quite sure where Helen's is. But I think you're New South Wales and I'm Victoria.
Yep.
So I think you actually need to look at the New South Wales one, or even the Queensland one. I actually think the Queensland one is probably tighter, but it's talking about public disclosure of the money that you get. Because it doesn't really matter where you get the money from, it's making it public that becomes important, and when you make it public. And then your own candidate might say, well, I don't want to get $50,000 from McDonald's. That's not something I want. So you want to have those sort of rules in place so that when McDonald's comes and offer you $50,000, you could say, thanks very much, but that doesn't fit within our guidelines. It's not personal. Here's what the rules are. So I don't think it actually makes a difference what they are, as long as you make them clear.
Thanks, Cathy.
So, Cathy, I think one of the questions that would be on a lot of people's lips is we have Climate 200 in the space now, and a lot of the independent candidates I know have approached them. So do you see anything to the detriment of a candidate to apply to Climate 200 to see if they said they would endorse what they called credible candidates?
I don't know the answer. You have to talk to your community.
Yeah.
You have to talk to your community. But I'll just tell you what I know Rebecca Sharkey is doing Rebecca Sharkey is a member for Mayo in South Australia. So she's got some of her own money from her own fundraising, and she's got some of money from Climate 200, and she's going to have a grants program. Oh. So rather than her use the Climate 200 money for publicity or whatever, she's going to invest it in small community charge stations, electric car charge stations. So I think there's lots of ways you can think about how you use money that actually works for you, that doesn't make you, because you have to be careful. The National Party will weaponise you. So you've got to pre-imagine how they're going to weaponise you, and then how are you going to manage it? And I don't know your community well enough to do that. So you have to work that one out.
And it's up for the candidate, to talk about that. So I just wondered, were there any other prospective candidates who would like to ask a question now, or Cathy can stay behind a little bit after to ask. So I'll just see if anyone wants to put their hand up now. Otherwise, I'll do a wind up. So I might look like Cathy. We might just stay behind Cathy, if you don't mind, and have that cup of tea we talked about.
Yeah.
And I'm going to thank Cathy for an amazing hour that we've had with her. How lucky are we to have that sort of expertise, that energy, and that knowledge that she's so happy to share. Where to from here? Well, candidate submissions close on Sunday, the 16th of January. If there's any more information, support and help that you need, please don't hesitate to give me a call. If I don't know it, I'll find it out. I'll probably ring Cathy. And on the 23rd of January, Saturday at 4 p.m, we will hold a Meet the Prospective Candidates forum. You'll receive an email inviting you to register, and you'll be able to send in questions. We will also be communicating with you on how and when you can vote for your preferred candidate. So once again, Cathy, and to all our wonderful voices, the Voices for Cowper Committee are here to amplify your voice. Spread the word, become involved as you meet and select your independent candidate for Cowper. They need your support to make Cowper electorate an independent voice.